Right now, as you're watching this video, roughly 1 in 10 people around you, your co-worker, your classmate, maybe even you, carry a trait that by every rule of evolution should have vanished from the human race long ago. And yet, across 50,000 years of history, through ice ages, empires, and extinction events, it survived. Scientists can't fully explain it. Ancient civilizations feared it, gladiators weaponized it, and today it quietly lives on in exactly 10% of every human population on Earth. In this video, you're going to discover the deep hidden history of left-handedness, from the oldest cave paintings ever found, to the terrifying superstitions of Mesopotamia, to the blood-soaked arenas of Rome, where being left-handed was worth more than gold. This is the story nature never wanted told, and if you love falling asleep to history that actually keeps you thinking, subscribe to the channel. New stories drop every week, just for curious minds like yours. Across the sweep of human history, a quiet anomaly has persisted, a subtle thread woven into the fabric of our species that defies simple explanation. For as long as records exist, in every culture and epoch, approximately 1 in 10 individuals has favored the left hand. This stable minority, this 10%, presents a profound evolutionary puzzle. In a world of relentless natural selection, where inefficiency is often culled, why would such a trait remain so stubbornly constant? It is a mystery that begins not in written texts, but in the deep shadows of prehistory, whispered in the silent language of stone and bone. The earliest clues are etched onto cave walls, in the ochre and charcoal dreams of our ancestors, in the flickering torchlight of places like Lascaux and Chauvet, among the majestic aurochs and prancing horses. Analysis of hand stencils reveals a telling asymmetry. By studying the angle of sprayed pigment, archaeologists deduce that a consistent minority of these ancient artists used their right hand to hold the blowing tube, implying their left was pressed against the rock. These negative imprints are more than art. They are the first census of handedness, a demographic snapshot frozen in time that shows the left-handed fraction was present tens of thousands of years ago. The story continues in the functional debris of daily survival, flint knapping. The meticulous craft of shaping stone into tools leaves a signature in the waste flakes. A right-handed toolmaker strikes a core in a predictable pattern, leaving debris scattered in a specific arc. At numerous Paleolithic sites, from Europe to Africa, a portion of the recovered toolkits tells a different story. The flake scars spiral the opposite way, the hammers struck from the left. These tools were not clumsy mistakes, but expertly crafted implements, scrapers, hand axes and projectile points, designed to fit comfortably in a left-handed grip. Their creators were not merely adapting, they were expressing an innate preference that shaped their very interaction with the material world. Even in death, the ancient left-hander left a mark. Consider the Neanderthal burial at La Forêt in France, or certain Homo sapiens graves from the Upper Paleolithic. The careful placement of bodies, the grave goods nestled beside them, sometimes tell a tale of lateral bias. A stone tool placed consistently on the left side of the body, suggesting it was drawn from a left-hand held pouch or belt. The wear patterns on the teeth of some skeletons, caused by using the mouth as a third hand while working hide or sinew, occasionally show a slant indicative of left-handed processing. These are faint forensic whispers, but they accumulate into a compelling narrative. Left-handers walked among both our cousins and our direct ancestors, fully integrated into the social and practical life of early human groups. This enduring presence deepens the mystery. From an evolutionary standpoint, a trait that persists across hundreds of thousands of years, through ice ages and migrations, must confer some balance of advantage or at least neutrality. In a predominantly right-handed world, one might expect left-handedness to be a disadvantage, clumsy in cooperative tool use, potentially dangerous in coordinated hunting. Yet the evidence screams otherwise. It was not bred out. It was not marginalized into extinction. Instead, it held its ground with remarkable tenacity, a steady drumbeat of difference against the rhythm of the majority. Why? What possible reason could nature have for preserving this minority? Was it a random genetic glitch, a mere accident of development perpetuated through the generations? Or did these left-handed individuals, these ancient southpaws, possess some hidden edge, some unexpected niche that made them not just tolerated, but essential to the survival of the tribe. The paradox lingers in the cool air of excavated caves and lies buried in stratified earth. The 10% were there at the dawn of art, at the birth of technology, in the solemnity of the first rituals. Their story is not one of later stigma, but of ancient enigmatic inclusion. The search for an answer to this primordial puzzle leads us out of the silent caves and into the noisy, complex worlds of the first civilizations, where the left hand would soon encounter a new and powerful force, the meaning imposed upon it by gods and kings. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 2, Gods and Omens, Part 1, asterisk, asterisk. The journey from the silent caves to the sun-baked plains of the first civilizations marked a profound shift in the human story, and with it, the narrative of the left hand began to fracture. In the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where the Sumerians built ziggurats that scraped the heavens, the natural world was not merely observed but interpreted as a divine text. Every flight of birds, every crack in a sheep's liver, every oddity of human behavior was an omen, a message from the gods. And in this intricate cosmology of meaning, the left side acquired a heavy and ominous significance. To the Sumerian diviner, the left was the side of the ominous, the inauspicious, the dangerous. When a celestial event occurred in the western sky, the left-hand side when facing north, the sacred direction, it was a portent of misfortune or divine displeasure. This association seeped into the language and the collective psyche. The very direction west was linked with the underworld, the land of the dead, a place of darkness. Consequently, any human trait that echoed this sinister geography was viewed with deep suspicion. A child who consistently reached with the left hand was not merely displaying a motor preference, he was manifesting a potential alignment with chaotic, ill-fated forces. Left-handedness became a living omen, a walking symbol of bad luck that could taint households and endeavors. This was not yet the violent persecution of later ages, but a quiet, pervasive stigma that would have shaped a left-handed child's life, pushing them towards concealment or forced adaptation under the watchful eyes of priests and anxious parents. Yet even as superstition cast its shadow, the pragmatic demands of life in these early empires told a different, more nuanced story. 1,000 miles down the Nile, in the land of the pharaohs, a more complex duality emerged. Egyptian cosmology prized balance above all, the equilibrium of Ma'at. This was reflected in a cultural ideal of ambidexterity, a harmonious use of both hands as a symbol of completeness and divine favor. Tomb paintings often depicted gods and pharaohs performing symmetrical actions, a visual representation of perfect balanced power. The right hand, associated with strength and order, typically held the scepter or the flail, but the ideal was a sovereign capable of all things with either limb. This philosophical ideal, however, collided with the practical evidence buried within the tombs themselves. Archaeologists have unearthed tools from the graves of artisans and workers that whisper of a tacit, everyday acceptance, a chisel worn smooth on its right side, suggesting it was held in a left-handed grip and struck with a right-handed mallet, a carpenter's adze, with a blade beveled for a pull stroke from the left. These were not ceremonial objects, but the well-used implements of daily labour, placed in the tomb for use in the afterlife. Their presence indicates that while the culture might have celebrated the ambidextrous ideal, the reality of individual handedness was accommodated without fanfare in the workshops that built eternity. The left-handed craftsman was valued for his skill, not shunned for his method. His tools were customized, not confiscated. This emerging duality, fear versus utility, became the bedrock of the left-hander's experience for millennia to come. In Mesopotamia, the interpretation of omens created a spiritual and social framework that cast the left hand as inherently suspect, a precursor to the word sinister that would echo through Latin centuries later. In Egypt, a theoretical preference for balanced symmetry was gently undermined by the silent testimony of practical necessity. The left-handed potter shaped his vessels. The left-handed scribe perhaps adjusted his grip on the reed, their functionality outweighing abstract cosmological alignment. Here, in the dust of these first great empires, the central conflict was laid bare. The human left hand was caught between the stories told about it and the things it was undeniably good at doing. It was both a portent of chaos and a precise instrument of creation, a dichotomy that would travel west across the Mediterranean to the cultures that would one day inherit the Sumerian dread and the Egyptian pragmatism, moulding them into new and enduring shapes. Asterisk. Asterisk. Chapter 2. Gods and Omens. Part 2. Asterisk. Asterisk. The Mediterranean sun, clear and rational, seemed to promise a different fate for the left hand as the cultural torch passed to the Greeks. In the agora where philosophy and logic were born, language itself offered a curious refuge. The Greek word for the left side was asterisk, aristera, asterisk, a term scholars believe derived from asterisk aristos, asterisk, meaning the best or the most useful. This linguistic kindness, however, was a fragile shield against a deep undercurrent of superstition that flowed from older Eastern sources. The Greeks, for all their reasons, still harboured a profound unease. The left was the side of the heart, the seat of passions and unpredictable emotions. To receive an omen from the left was often a warning. A sneeze to the left was bad luck. A bird appearing on the left side of one's path could spell disaster. This cultural contradiction lived in the same breath, a word that meant the better for a side considered the portentous. The left-handed Athenian might find his handedness noted with a curious philosophical interest by a thinker like Aristotle, who pondered such variations in nature, yet still feel the subtle social chill of an unspoken bias during a religious festival, or the interpretation of a sacrificial augury. It was to the West, in the rigid militaristic society of Rome, that this duality hardened into a stark and practical paradox. The Roman war machine was a monument to standardized right-handedness. The legionary's large rectangular asterisk, scutum asterisk, was designed to be held in the left hand, protecting the heart and leaving the right arm free to thrust the asterisk gladius. Asterisk. This equipment assumed a right-handed wielder. A left-handed soldier would have to hold his shield awkwardly, his sword arm trapped, his entire defensive posture inverted and vulnerable. In the tightly packed ranks of the legion, such individuality was not merely inefficient, it was dangerous, a break in the unified wall that could cost lives. The military system, therefore, naturally filtered left-handers out of the main infantry lines, a silent institutional pressure reinforcing the norm. Yet in the blood-soaked sand of the arena, the Roman valuation flipped entirely. Here, the left-hander, the asterisk, a saver asterisk, was both feared and prized. Gladiatorial combat was not about unison, but about singular, lethal spectacle. A left-handed fighter, a asterisk scavarius asterisk, presented a unique and formidable challenge. Every right-handed gladiator was trained through endless repetition to fight other right-handers. Their footwork, their parries, their angles of attack were all drilled against a mirror image. Against a left-handed opponent, this entire mental and physical map was reversed. The Scavarius's shield was on the wrong side. His sword strikes came from unfamiliar angles, creating a confusing mirror-world combat that could unsettle even the most experienced veteran. This unexpected advantage made left-handed gladiators particularly deadly, and consequently, highly valuable commodities for their asterisk lanistei asterisk. Their trainers, they were the wild cards, the living puzzles whose very presence increased the dramatic uncertainty and the betting odds of a match. The crowd might whisper about the oddity, the faint superstition clinging to the asterisk, sinister asterisk side, but they roared in appreciation of the tactical surprise and brutal efficiency the asterisk scavarius asterisk provided. Thus, in the classical world, the left-hander occupied a deeply conflicted space. In the philosophical lexicon of Greece, he was linguistically the better, yet socially tinged with ancient omens. In the practical empire of Rome, he was an ill fit for the citizen army, but a star in the brutal theatre of the arena. He was both a strategic advantage and a subject of low superstition, a prized asset and a minor aberration. This contradiction was not resolved but embedded, a testament to humanity's capacity to hold two opposing truths at once, a deep-seated, almost instinctual suspicion of the left, and an undeniable respect for the practical, often superior results the left hand could deliver in moments of individual crisis or competition. The left-hander was, in essence, a living paradox, a bad omen that could save your life, a sinister presence that could bring you victory. This classical inheritance of mixed messages would flow directly into the bedrock of Western thought, where it would be sanctified and codified not by philosophers or generals, but by prophets and priests, in texts that would echo for millennia. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 3, The Classical Crossroads, asterisk, asterisk. From the arenas of Rome, the narrative of the left hand turned eastward, toward the rocky hills of Judea and the nascent faith that would reshape the Western world. Here, in the sacred texts of the Bible, the duality of the left hand was not merely a matter of superstition or tactical advantage, but was elevated to a cosmic principle, etched into the very language of divinity and judgment. The right hand became the unequivocal symbol of power, blessing and salvation. God's right hand acted with mighty power. The righteous were placed at the right hand of the Father. Conversely, the left hand was the instrument of separation and judgment. In the Gospel of Matthew, the Son of Man places the sheep, the blessed, on his right, but the goats, the condemned, on his left. This theological geography was absolute. Right was holy, left was profane. Right meant grace, left meant rejection. For the early Jewish and Christian communities, this cemented a spiritual hierarchy of the body that made left-handedness more than a curiosity. It became a state of inherent spiritual unease, a physical alignment with the side of divine reproach. Yet, within the same scriptural tradition, a startling and subversive story unfolds, one that celebrates left-handed prowess in terms so vivid, they defy the emerging stigma. The Book of Judges recounts the tale of the Benjamites, a tribe of Israel that could muster an elite force of 700 chosen men. These warriors were not ordinary soldiers. They were all left-handed, and each was so lethally precise with a sling that they could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. This was not an accident of conscription, but a noted, celebrated military specialty. In a pivotal battle, these left-handed slingers turned the tide, their unexpected angle of attack and peerless accuracy delivering a crushing victory. The text presents their handedness, not as a mark of Cain, but as a God-given tactical gift, a natural advantage honed to perfection. Here was the paradox in its purest form. The very tradition that codified the left hand as the side of judgment also contained a foundational myth that glorified left-handed skill as divinely instrumental to survival and triumph. This biblical contradiction, the left hand as both spiritually suspect and martially superb, flowed directly into the symbolism of the early Christian church. The liturgical and artistic language of Christianity overwhelmingly sanctified the right. The faithful were blessed with the right hand. The Eucharist was elevated with the right hand. Saints in mosaics and icons gestured with their right hands toward heaven. The left hand, if depicted, was often passive, holding a book or a scroll, or deliberately hidden within folds of cloth. This visual theology seeped into everyday practice. To make the sign of the cross with the left hand was considered invalid, even blasphemous. Catechumens were instructed to use their right hand for all sacred acts. In such an environment, a naturally left-handed child was not simply clumsy, he was liturgically misaligned, his innate inclination a constant, quiet rebellion against the sacred order of things. The spiritual unease was palpable, a gentle but persistent pressure to conform the body to the symmetry of salvation. Thus, at the classical crossroads where Judaic tradition met Christian doctrine, the left-hander's path forked dramatically. One road, paved with scripture and sacrament, led into the shadows of symbolic inferiority, where every involuntary reach with the wrong hand was a tiny echo of the goats on the left. The other road, illuminated by the slingstones of the Benjamites, led to a recognition of formidable, even God-favoured difference. For centuries, the former path would be the wider and more travelled one, its influence deepening through the Middle Ages. The Church's powerful symbolism provided a theological backbone for the older pagan superstitions, transforming vague unease into doctrinal gravity. The left hand was no longer just an omen, it was now ontologically secondary, a living metaphor for that which was set apart not for blessing, but for judgment. Yet the story of the left-handed army remained, a quiet, resilient counter-narrative buried in the sacred text itself, a testament that even within systems designed to cast one side into shadow, the brilliance of a different-handedness could, and did, flash forth with decisive history-altering force. Asterisk. Asterisk. Chapter 4. The Medieval Mark, Part 1. Asterisk. Asterisk. The fall of Rome did not dispel the shadow over the left hand. It deepened it, thickening into a pervasive gloom that seeped into the very timber and stone of medieval life. As the Latin West fractured into kingdoms and Christendom solidified its grip on the European mind, the Church's symbolic hierarchy hardened into a social and spiritual absolute. The right hand was the hand of God, of oath-swearing, of blessing. The left was its sinister counterpart. Literally, the Latin word asterisk, sinister, asterisk, which simply meant left, accrued layers of connotation like grime on a cathedral wall, coming to signify evil, misfortune, and deceit. This was no mere linguistic drift. It was doctrine. The left became the side of the devil. In religious art, Satan and his demons were often depicted as left-handed, or with deformities on their left side. The damned were hurled into hell's mouth from Christ's left. This association was preached from pulpits and carved into tympanums, teaching an illiterate populace a visceral theology of the body. To be left-handed was to bear a physical mark of spiritual waywardness, a potential kinship with the fallen angel himself. Everyday existence for the medieval left-hander became a minefield of minor humiliations and forced adaptations. The world of tools was built for the right-handed majority. The blacksmith's hammer, the carpenter's saw, the farmer's scythe, all were fashioned for efficiency and a right-handed grip. A left-handed user would find them awkward, even dangerous, their bodies constantly contorting to fit a backward design. Writing, a skill increasingly important within monastic and later urban settings, presented a particular torment. The quill pen, cut for a right hand, would catch and splatter if pulled by the left. The ink, still wet, would smear across the parchment, leaving a chaotic trail across carefully ruled lines. This was not seen as a technical challenge, but as a moral failing, a messy, clumsy propensity that mirrored the supposed disorder of the soul. Left-handed children were swiftly and firmly corrected, their left hands often tied behind their backs or struck with a rod to encourage the proper use of the right. The social stigma was quiet but corrosive. At the communal table, where shared trenchers and drinking horns were the norm, a left-handed person's elbow would constantly jostle their right-handed neighbour, a persistent nuisance that could lead to accusations of deliberate rudeness or uncouthness. In handshakes or exchanges of goods, offering the left hand was an insult, a breach of protocol that hinted at bad faith. This constant pressure to monitor and suppress a natural impulse fostered a sense of isolation. The left-hander lived a life of conscious performance, translating every spontaneous movement into a calculated, acceptable one, forever aware of being out of step with the physical choreography of their community. Folklore absorbed and amplified this anxiety, weaving tales that transformed left-handed children from mere oddities into objects of supernatural terror. In the dim, fire-lit cottages of rural Europe, stories circulated of changelings, fairy children left in place of stolen human babies. One of the most common signs of a changeling, left-handedness. A child who persistently reached with the wrong hand, who seemed clumsy with right-handed tools, might be suspected of being not truly human, but a fey creature of ill intent. Such beliefs, born of fear and ignorance, could have tragic consequences, from neglect to outright abandonment. The left-handed child became a living puzzle, their very body a text read through a lens of dread, where a simple motor preference might be interpreted as evidence of a stolen soul or demonic substitution. Thus, in the long centuries of the medieval period, the left-hander bore a mark far deeper than mere inconvenience. They carried a cultural and spiritual burden, their bodies interpreted as walking testaments to sin, their natural motions seen as echoes of the devil's own perversity. The word sinister now fully embodied this fusion, a permanent lexical stain. Yet, even within this oppressive climate, the essential pragmatism of human labour persisted. In the scriptorium, a left-handed monk might subtly adjust his desk or his grip to complete his illuminations. In the workshop, a left-handed artisan might modify his tools, leaving behind artifacts that to a trained eye still whisper of a different-handedness. The mark was upon them, but it did not completely erase them. It simply forced their difference into hiding, into the margins and the adaptations, a silent testament to resilience in an age that named their very nature evil. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 4, The Medieval Mark, Part 2, asterisk, asterisk. The simmering suspicion of the medieval era boiled over into outright terror during the witch hunt frenzy that swept across Europe and the American colonies. In the paranoid climate where a neighbour's envy or a failed crop could be explained by maleficium, the evil eye of witchcraft, any deviation from the norm became potential evidence. Left-handedness, already stained by the word sinister and its diabolical associations, was now catalogued as a key sign of a pact with the devil. Interrogation manuals, such as the infamous Asterix Malleus Maleficarum Asterix, noted that witches often performed their profane rites with the left hand, received the devil's mark on their left side, and offered unholy oaths with left-handed gestures. Inquisitors and witch-finders were instructed to observe the accused closely for this trait, interpreting a natural motor preference as a conscious choice of allegiance to darkness. The persecution was particularly tragic for left-handed women, who bore the brunt of the hunts. In a society already deeply anxious about female power and autonomy, a woman's left-handedness could be twisted into proof of her inherent moral weakness and susceptibility to Satan's seduction. Testimonies from trials are littered with such accusations. A woman from Lancashire in 1612 was cited as suspicious because she always stirred her pot with her left hand, widdershins. Another in Salem was noted for handing a piece of bread to a child with her left, a simple act recast as a deliberate malign gesture. For these women, their handedness was no longer a private challenge but a public condemnation, a physical detail that could and did lead to the dungeon, the torture rack and the pyre. Their stories are largely lost, swallowed by the flames, but the court records that remain speak of a profound injustice where the mere act of reaching became a capital crime. Yet, even in this darkest of times, flickers of adaptation and quiet resilience persisted. Away from the paranoid villages and the inquisitors' chambers, in the relative solitude of workshops and scriptoria, some left-handed individuals continued to practice their crafts. Their handedness left subtle, hidden marks upon their work, like secret signatures of a forbidden identity. A medieval scribe, forced by monastic rule to write with his right hand, might still betray his nature in the delicate illuminations he painted. The brushwork on a marginal vine, or the delicate hatching on an angel's robe, could show a characteristic leftward slant, a pull stroke from a hand that was supposed to be idle. These tiny deviations, invisible to the casual observer, are now telltale clues for modern historians analysing manuscripts. In the stone yards and carpentry shops, left-handed artisans adapted their tools and techniques. A mason's chisel, worn on the opposite bevel, suggests a left-handed strike. The spiral twist in a wrought-iron gate hinge, or the direction of the planing marks on a medieval chest, can sometimes reveal a craftsman working against the grain of convention. These individuals were not celebrated for their difference. They likely concealed it as much as possible to avoid notice, but in the functional beauty of their creations, in the strength of a joint, the flow of a metal scroll, the precision of a carved leaf, they asserted their skill over superstition. Their legacy is not in trial documents but in the very fabric of surviving medieval art and architecture, where the evidence of their left-handed labour remains, silent and steadfast. Thus the medieval mark was a double seal. For many, especially the vulnerable, it was a brand of fear that could lead to persecution and death, the ultimate expression of a culture that had pathologized a simple trait. For a resilient few, it became a hidden signature, a quiet insistence on practicality and skill in the face of doctrinal terror. They navigated a world that saw their left hand as a demon's tool, yet used that same hand to create, to build, and to record the very world that feared them. Their story is one of tragic victimhood, shadowed by a tenacious, almost invisible resistance, a proof that even under the heaviest cultural weight, the human capacity to adapt and express innate ability could not be entirely extinguished. The left hand in the darkest hours of the witch hunts was both a target and a testament. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 5, The Renaissance Turn. Asterisk, asterisk. A slow, almost imperceptible light began to seep into the long medieval night, not yet dispelling the shadows around the left hand, but softening their edges. The Renaissance, with its rediscovery of classical humanism and its celebration of individual genius, created cracks in the rigid doctrinal wall. In the sun-drenched studios of Florence and the candlelit studies of polymaths, the left hand found not just tolerance, but in one spectacular instance, a kind of enigmatic apotheosis. Leonardo da Vinci, the archetypal Renaissance man, left behind a trail of clues that have convinced generations he was left-handed. His notebooks, filled with breathtaking anatomical sketches, inventive machines and philosophical musings, are written in a peculiar mirror script, backward, flowing from right to left, perfectly legible only when held to a mirror. This was no mere code or affectation. It was the natural, efficient motion of a left-handed writer dragging a quill across paper, avoiding the smearing of wet ink that had plagued medieval left-handed scribes. In Leonardo, left-handedness was not a mark of the devil, but a facet of a mind that saw the world from a uniquely inverted angle, a mind that could envision flying machines and dissect hearts with equal clarity. His very handwriting became a symbol of his revolutionary perspective, a physical manifestation of thinking differently. Yet, even as individual brilliance flourished, new systemic pressures were coalescing that would constrain the left-handed masses more effectively than any superstition. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg created a world of standardized texts, but more importantly, it cemented a standardized page layout and reading direction left to right. This seemingly trivial detail had profound implications. As literacy spread beyond monasteries, formal education became more common, and with it came the rigid enforcement of right-handed writing. The steel-nibbed pen, a successor to the quill, was even more unforgiving to the left-handed pushstroke, catching and spattering. Schoolmasters across Europe, and later the American colonies, saw the messy, ink-smudged work of a left-handed child not as a challenge to accommodate, but as disobedience to a natural order, now reinforced by the printed word. The classroom became a battleground where left-handedness was systematically trained out through repetition, scolding, and sometimes corporal punishment. The rationale had shifted slightly, from spiritual peril to practical inefficiency, but the coercion remained. Despite this growing institutional pressure, left-handed brilliance persisted in the corners of art and science, a quiet counterpoint to the march toward conformity. Michelangelo Buonarroti, another titan of the Renaissance, is also widely believed to have been left-handed. His monumental frescoes in the Sistine Chapel required him to paint overhead for years, a brutal physical endeavor where his handedness may have influenced his unique, powerful approach to form and anatomy. In the realm of science, figures like the French philosopher and mathematician René Descartes, suspected of left-handedness, exemplified the era's analytical turn, their minds perhaps organized in ways that favored abstract spatial reasoning. These individuals were celebrated for their output, their handedness, an unremarked curiosity overshadowed by their achievements. Their success hinted at a possibility that the left-handed mind might offer cognitive advantages, particularly in visualization and conceptual thinking, that were perfectly suited to the exploratory spirit of the age. The most significant shift, however, was not in the workshops of artists, but in the pages of early medical texts. The Enlightenment's emphasis on observation and reason began to filter into the study of human anatomy and behavior. Physicians and natural philosophers started to catalogue handedness as a physiological trait rather than a moral one. In the 17th century, writings emerged that gently questioned the old superstitions, noting the prevalence of left-handedness in otherwise healthy, capable individuals. This was a quiet revolution, the first tentative steps toward medicalizing what had been demonized. The left hand was being removed from the realm of theology and folklore and placed under the nascent light of scientific inquiry. It was no longer solely an omen or a mark. It was becoming a subject for study, a variation in the human design worthy of calm observation rather than fearful correction. Thus, the Renaissance and Enlightenment presented a profound contradiction for the left-hander. On one hand, the era produced iconic figures whose left-handedness seemed intertwined with their legendary genius, suggesting a liberation of individual potential. On the other, it gave birth to the mechanisms, standardized education, mass-produced tools, and a culture of efficiency that would soon enforce conformity with unprecedented rigor. The left hand stood at a crossroads, glimpsed as a possible source of unique intellectual power, yet simultaneously targeted for eradication in the name of modern uniformity. The witch's mark had faded, but in its place was emerging the schoolmaster's ruler, a new instrument of correction backed not by fear of hellfire, but by the pragmatic demands of an industrializing world. The battle was moving from the soul to the classroom, from superstition to standardization, setting the stage for a century of relentless systematic constraint. Asterisk. Asterisk. Chapter 6. The Victorian Constraint. Asterisk. Asterisk. The 19th century dawned with a new ironclad ideology of conformity, and the left hand faced its most systematic and relentless assault. The Industrial Revolution had ushered in an age of standardization, of parts, of time, of labor. Factories demanded interchangeable workers. Burgeoning nation-states required literate, disciplined citizens. In this world of efficiency and order, the left-hander was not a sinner or a witch, but a defect in the machine, a deviation from the norm that required correction. The classroom became the primary engine of this enforcement. As mass education expanded, reaching children in crowded urban schools and regimented rural ones, the suppression of left-handedness was adopted as pedagogical dogma. It was no longer merely encouraged, it was aggressively imposed, with a chilling array of punishments and restraints designed to break the natural inclination. Teachers, armed with canes and rigid curricula, viewed a child's left-handed reach as a stubborn flaw to be eradicated. The left hand would be tied behind the back, sometimes for hours, forcing the use of the right. Special restraining devices were marketed, leather straps that bound the left wrist to the chair, elastic bands that connected the left hand to a button on the right shoulder, even stiffening mittens that rendered the fingers useless. A child attempting to write with the left would have their knuckles rapped sharply with a ruler, the sting a visceral reminder of their transgression. In some schools, the left hand was forcibly held under scalding water to create a negative association. The goal was not education but reprogramming, a brutal behavioral conditioning justified by the era's twin gods, efficiency and propriety. A left-handed scrawl was messy, slow and smudged the ink on the newly standardized rightward slanting copybooks. It was therefore intolerable. The psychological and physical harm inflicted was profound. Children subjected to these methods often developed speech impediments, nervous tics and chronic anxiety, symptoms later grouped under the term stammering sickness, which Victorian doctors sometimes linked directly to forced hand switching. The act of writing, a gateway to knowledge and expression, became associated with shame, pain, and failure. Many left-handers internalized a deep-seated sense of being fundamentally wrong, a flaw that required constant vigilance to hide. The physical awkwardness of using the non-dominant hand could last a lifetime, resulting in a clumsy, labored script and a lingering sense of physical incompetence. The campaign was so effective that demographic studies from the period show a noticeable, artificial dip in the recorded prevalence of left-handedness, a statistical testament to successful suppression, not to the trait's disappearance. Yet even as this institutional crusade reached its peak, the first rigorous scientific studies of handedness were quietly beginning in laboratories and lecture halls. The same century that bound left hands behind backs also saw the birth of empirical psychology. Pioneers like Sir John William Strutt, Lord Rayleigh, and later the anthropologist Robert Hertz began collecting systematic data. They distributed surveys, measured manual dexterity, and tabulated the handedness of thousands of individuals, seeking patterns beyond superstition. For the first time, handedness was being quantified, its prevalence noted as a stable human polymorphism, worthy of dispassionate study, not moral panic. This data collection coincided with revolutionary discoveries in neuroanatomy. In the 1860s, French physician Paul Broca identified a specific region in the brain's left hemisphere, critical for speech. This breakthrough established the principle of cerebral lateralization, the idea that different brain hemispheres specialize in different functions. Shortly after, the German neurologist Karl Wernicke further mapped language to the left hemisphere. Scientists began to connect the dots. If language lived predominantly in the left brain, and the left brain controlled the right side of the body, then perhaps right-handedness was a corollary of this linguistic specialization. The left-hander, by implication, might possess a fundamentally different neurological organization, Early theories speculated that left-handers either had reversed lateralization, with language centered in the right hemisphere, or perhaps more symmetrical, less specialized brains. Thus, the Victorian age presented a stark dichotomy. In the brightly lit, orderly classroom, the left hand was being brutally disciplined into submission, its very existence treated as a correctable error in a standardized world. Meanwhile, in the hushed, gaslit halls of science, that same hand was becoming a subject of profound mystery, a key that might unlock the secrets of the brain's asymmetrical design. The constraint was physical and psychological, but the curiosity was intellectual, laying the groundwork for a future understanding that would ultimately undermine the rationale for the coercion. The left-hander of the 19th century lived in the tense space between these two realities, bound by leather straps on one side, and yet, unbeknownst to them, becoming increasingly fascinating to the nascent science that would one day champion neural diversity. The era of punishment was also, paradoxically, the dawn of comprehension. Chapter 9, The Genetic Riddle, Part 1. The dawn of the 20th century brought with it a new lens through which to examine humanity's oldest asymmetries, the science of genetics. As Gregor Mendel's rediscovered pea plant experiments revealed the particulate nature of inheritance, scientists turned their gaze from cultural stigma to biological blueprint, asking a fundamental question. If traits like eye color and height ran in families, could the inclination of the hand? The answer, gathered from countless family trees and population surveys, was a resounding yes. Handedness did indeed cluster in families. A left-handed parent was statistically more likely to have a left-handed child than a right-handed one, a pattern whispering of heredity. This discovery was a profound shift. The left hand was no longer just a mark of the devil or a pedagogical nuisance. It was potentially written in the code of life itself. The search for this biological script led to the proposal of a beautifully simple theory, the right shift gene. Pioneered by the British psychologist Marion Annett in the 1970s, the model suggested a single gene, or a small set of genes, that created a bias toward right-handedness and left hemisphere language dominance in the brain. Under this model, inheriting the right shift allele from one or both parents predisposed an individual to become right-handed. Those who lacked this genetic nudge, inheriting a hypothetical neutral allele from both parents, were left to chance. Their handedness would then be determined by random developmental fluctuations or subtle environmental pressures, resulting in the familiar 10%. This elegant idea promised to solve the mystery, framing left-handedness as a default state that emerged in the absence of a specific genetic instruction to be right-handed. Yet, the human genome, as scientists would learn, is rarely so obligingly simple. The inheritance patterns of handedness stubbornly refused to follow the clean, predictable ratios of Mendelian genetics. Two right-handed parents could, and often did, produce a left-handed child. Two left-handed parents frequently had mostly right-handed offspring. The right shift gene, if it existed, was not a dictator but a subtle influencer, its effects easily overridden or masked. The puzzle deepened. Why wasn't the transmission straightforward? If a single gene was at play, left-handedness should breed true far more often than it did. The messy, real-world data suggested a more complex interplay, a genetic whisper rather than a shout, leaving ample room for other forces to shape the final outcome of which hand reached out first. A powerful tool for disentangling nature from nurture emerged in the study of twins. Identical twins, who share 100% of their DNA, would, under a purely genetic model, always share the same handedness, but they do not. In a significant minority of cases, one identical twin is right-handed and the other left-handed. This discordance was a revelation. It provided irrefutable evidence that genetics alone could not be the sole architect of handedness. Something else, something in the environment, or something random in the intricate dance of prenatal development, was playing a decisive role. The womb, it seemed, was not a perfectly neutral chamber. Tiny variations in hormone levels, slight differences in fetal position, the stochastic noise of cellular division, any of these could tip the balance for a genetically predisposed individual. leading one twin to develop a preference for the left while the other, with identical genes, favored the right. Thus, by the mid-20th century, the genetic riddle had transformed from a search for a simple switch into an appreciation of a profound complexity. Handedness was heritable, but not in a deterministic way. It was familial, but not predictable. The emerging picture was of a polygenic trait, influenced by many genes of small effect, all interacting with a non-genetic landscape of chance and circumstance. The left-hander was not simply a genetic variant, but a developmental outcome, a unique confluence of inherited predisposition and the chaotic, beautiful randomness of becoming. The search for answers would now plunge deeper, beyond family trees and twin registries, into the hidden fluid world of the developing fetus, where the first whispers of lateral preference are believed to begin. The genes set the stage, but the play of development writes the final act. Asterisk. Chapter 10. The Genetic Riddle. Part 2. Asterisk. The search for the origins of handedness now plunges into the warm, fluid darkness of the womb, where the blueprint of genes meets the chaos of becoming. Modern prenatal research reveals that the preference for one hand over the other is not a decision made in childhood, but a tendency set in motion long before birth. Ultrasound studies show fetuses as young as 10 weeks old exhibiting a consistent bias, sucking their right or left thumb with a startling permanence. This early emergence points to a process far more fundamental than learning, a foundational asymmetry woven into the very fabric of neurological development. Here, in this private sea, the genetic predisposition meets a world of chance, where hormones, position, and microscopic randomness conspire to tip the scales. A key player in this prenatal drama appears to be testosterone, a hormone crucial for fetal development. Higher levels of prenatal testosterone, some research suggests, can slow the maturation of the brain's left hemisphere. Since the left hemisphere typically controls the right side of the body and drives right-handedness, a slight developmental delay on the left might allow the right hemisphere and thus the left hand to gain a competitive advantage. This theory links left-handedness to other traits potentially influenced by fetal testosterone, such as certain immune responses and spatial reasoning patterns. It is a delicate hormonal ballet, where a fluctuation in chemical signals can redirect the neural traffic, setting a child on a lifelong path of left-handed dominance. But hormones are not the sole arbiters. The concept of fluctuating asymmetry provides a broader biological framework. In an ideal, perfectly symmetrical organism, both sides would be identical mirrors. In reality, all bilateral creatures, from fruit flies to humans, exhibit small, random deviations between left and right. A slightly longer finger on one hand, a minor variance in ear shape. These are not genetic defects, but the natural noise of development, the accumulated microscopic errors that occur as cells divide and tissues form in a less than perfect environment. Handedness, according to this view, may be the most pronounced manifestation of this universal asymmetry. The developing brain, as it wires itself, might simply amplify a tiny random bias in neural circuitry, locking in a preference for one side. In this model, left-handedness is not a programmed trait but a developmental accident, a roll of the dice at the cellular level that gets cemented into the architecture of the mind. Yet, if left-handedness were merely a random error or a byproduct of hormonal noise, evolutionary logic suggests it might have been selected against over millennia. The persistence of the stable 10%, however, demands a positive explanation. This is where the elegant theory of balanced polymorphism enters, offering a compelling answer to the ancient mystery. The theory proposes that left-handedness is maintained in the population because it confers a rare but powerful advantage, one that balances out its potential costs. This advantage is most vividly demonstrated in the realm of direct competition, the surprise factor. Imagine a prehistoric conflict, a duel, or a modern boxing ring. In a world where 90% of opponents are right-handed, every encounter is practiced and predictable for the majority. Their moves, their angles, their defenses are calibrated against a mirror image. A left-handed fighter, a Scavarius in the Roman mould, breaks this symmetry. Their stance is reversed. Their powerful strikes come from unexpected directions. This fighter hypothesis suggests that throughout human history, left-handers have enjoyed a disproportionate advantage in hand-to-hand combat and competitive sports. This edge would have been especially valuable in our evolutionary past, where survival and social status often hinged on physical prowess. The left-hander's novelty granted them a higher chance of victory, which in turn meant greater access to resources, mates, and protection, evolutionary rewards that would propagate their genes. Thus, the 10% is not an error, but an equilibrium. The costs of left-handedness in a right-handed world, the minor inefficiencies, the social friction, are balanced by the significant occasional benefit of being an unpredictable opponent. It is a dynamic evolutionary stalemate. When left-handers become too rare, their surprise advantage grows so potent that their reproductive success increases, raising their numbers back toward the equilibrium. If they become too common, the advantage diminishes as right-handers gain more experience fighting them, and the costs of being different exert a downward pressure. The result is a stable, oscillating minority, forever hovering around that magical, persistent 10%. The left-hander, therefore, is not a mistake of nature but a strategic adaptation, a living embodiment of the value of surprise, a necessary counterpoint in humanity's eternal game of competition. Their genes whisper of chance, their brains bear the marks of hormonal tides, but their enduring presence sings a clear evolutionary truth. In a world of predictable right hands, the left is the wild card that nature, in its infinite wisdom, decided to keep in the deck. Asterisk. Asterisk. Chapter 8. The Brain's Mirror. Asterisk. Asterisk. The mystery of the left hand does not reside in the fingers, the wrist, or the muscles of the forearm. Its source lies deeper, in the 3-pound universe of folded grey matter encased within the skull. To understand handedness is to embark on a journey into the brain's most fundamental asymmetry, a crossing of wires so complete that it feels like a cosmic joke. The left hemisphere of the brain controls the right side of the body. The right hemisphere commands the left. This contralateral rule is one of neurology's most elegant and perplexing truths, meaning that a left-hander's dominant hand is ultimately an extension of their right cerebral hemisphere. This neural crossover, this biological crisscross, turns every simple gesture into a testament to a complex mirrored architecture. The left hand is, in a very literal sense, the right brain's ambassador to the world. This wiring is most famously illustrated in the domain of language. For the majority of right-handers, the capacity for speech, grammar, and literal interpretation is heavily localized in the left hemisphere, a phenomenon known as lateralization. This left brain dominance for language is so common that it is considered the neurological norm. But what of the left-hander? Here, the brain's map becomes wonderfully blurred. Only about 70% of left-handers have language centered in the left hemisphere, as right-handers do. The remaining 30% show a different organization. Some have language functions split between both hemispheres, while a significant minority have language primarily housed in the right hemisphere, a complete reversal of the usual blueprint. This variability suggests that the left-handed brain is not merely a mirror image of the right-handed one, but a differently organized landscape, with cognitive functions distributed according to a more flexible, less predictable plan. This leads to the enduring question: are left-handers' brains more symmetrical? Research using advanced imaging techniques like fMRI presents a nuanced picture. While left-handers do not universally possess perfectly symmetrical brains, studies consistently show that, on average, their hemispheres are more balanced in size and connectivity, particularly in regions associated with hand control and sensory processing. The thick bundle of nerve fibers that connects the two hemispheres, the corpus callosum, may be slightly larger or more densely wired in some left-handers and ambidextrous individuals. This enhanced bridge might facilitate faster communication between the hemispheres, allowing for a more integrated, less siloed form of processing. The left-handed brain, it seems, might be built for collaboration across the midline, a neurological design that favors synthesis over strict specialization. Such neurological differences have long fueled speculation about cognitive distinctions. A soothing demystification of the science is essential here. Popular culture is rife with oversimplifications, the rigid, logical right-hander versus the creative, intuitive left-hander. The reality is far more subtle and individual. Large-scale studies reveal only mild statistical trends, not absolutes. Some research suggests left-handers may have a slight edge in certain types of spatial reasoning, mental rotation, and divergent thinking. The ability to generate multiple solutions to a problem. This could stem from their more bilateral brain organization, allowing the visuospatial strengths typically associated with the right hemisphere to interplay more freely with the linguistic and analytical capacities of the left. In tasks like navigating a maze, imagining a three-dimensional object from different angles, or brainstorming novel uses for a common item, the left-handed brain's integrated architecture might offer a modest advantage. Yet it is crucial to frame these potential differences not as superiorities or deficits, but as variations in cognitive style. The left-hander's brain is a testament to neural plasticity and the many paths the developing mind can take. The corpus callosum, that intricate information superhighway, works overtime to coordinate a potentially less lateralized system, creating a unique cognitive ecology. This might explain why left-handers are overrepresented in certain professions that demand strong visual spatial integration and novel problem-solving, such as architecture, music, and certain branches of mathematics and theoretical physics. Their brains are not better, they are simply wired for a different kind of conversation between intuition and analysis, between the holistic picture and the sequential detail. Ultimately, the science of the left-handed brain is a soothing demystification. It replaces ancient fears of spiritual waywardness with a quiet awe for biological diversity. The crossover of hemispheres, the mysteries of language lateralization, the subtle symmetries and enhanced connections, all these factors paint a portrait of a natural, adaptive variation in the human neural blueprint. The left hand is not a mistake, but a manifestation of a differently organized mind, a brain that mirrors the world in its own distinct pattern. This internal architecture, forged by genetics, shaped by chance in the womb, and refined by a lifetime of navigating a right-handed world, is the true source of the left-hander's unique perspective. It is a quiet, biological revolution happening inside the skull, a testament to the many ways a human brain can be built to comprehend, create, and connect with the universe. Asterisk. Asterisk. Chapter 9. The Fighters and the Artists. Asterisk. Asterisk. Throughout the long, shadowed history of the left hand, one gleaming thread persists, the undeniable advantage of surprise. While cultures whispered of sinister portents and educators labored to enforce conformity, left-handers quietly excelled in arenas where unpredictability was a weapon and a unique perspective was a gift. This duality finds its clearest expression in two seemingly separate realms, the violent clarity of combat and the boundless creativity of art. The left-hander has been both the feared opponent in the duel and the visionary at the easel, their handedness a common root branching into radically different forms of mastery. The fighter hypothesis provides a compelling evolutionary explanation for the persistence of the 10%. In direct one-on-one physical competition, a left-handed opponent presents a rare and disorienting challenge. The majority of combatants trained and experienced against right-handed foes find their entire tactical framework inverted. Footwork, defensive angles, and the trajectory of attacks are all calibrated for a mirror image. A left-handed fighter, or southpaw, breaks this symmetry. Their dominant side leads, their power strikes come from unanticipated vectors, and their defensive posture guards a different profile. This surprise factor conferred a lethal edge in ancient warfare, where individual skill in hand-to-hand combat could decide a skirmish. Historical accounts from the left-handed slingers of the Benjamites to the feared Scavari, gladiators of Rome, celebrate this tactical anomaly. In the modern era, the advantage translates seamlessly to the sporting arena. In boxing, fencing, and martial arts, left-handed athletes are consistently overrepresented among elite champions. Their natural stance forces right-handed opponents out of their comfort zone, requiring extra mental processing and adjustment in the split-second economy of a fight. This recurring edge suggests that, across millennia, left-handers have enjoyed a disproportionate rate of success in competitive violence, a Darwinian reward that helped maintain their genetic lineage against the social and practical costs of living in a right-handed world. Profiles of famous left-handed warriors and athletes read like a roll call of strategic brilliance. Alexander the Great, conqueror of the known world, is often depicted in mosaics and sculptures wielding his sword with his left hand, a detail that may have contributed to his legendary, unpredictable tactics on the battlefield. In the American Civil War, the Confederate General Stonewall Jackson, a noted southpaw, was famed for his rapid flanking maneuvers that consistently confounded his opponents. The sporting world offers a clearer gallery, the dazzling footwork of left-handed soccer legend Lionel Messi, who cuts inside from the right wing onto his dominant foot, defying defensive expectations. The powerful, unorthodox serve of tennis champion Rafael Nadal, a natural right-hander trained to play left-handed for a tactical edge. The devastating right hooks of boxing icon Manny Pacquiao, launched from a southpaw stance that has bewildered a generation of fighters. In these individuals, left-handedness is not a curiosity, but a core component of their formidable prowess, a built-in element of surprise, honed to perfection. Yet the same neurological and cognitive ingredients that make for a disorienting fighter can also cultivate an extraordinary artist or thinker. The more symmetrical or differently organized left-handed brain, with its potentially enhanced communication between hemispheres, may foster a cognitive style suited to synthesis, spatial manipulation, and novel connections. This is vividly embodied in the lives of history's great left-handed creators. Michelangelo Buonarroti, sculpting the David, or painting the Sistine Chapel ceiling, possessed a titanic spatial intelligence, able to visualize and execute complex forms from every angle, his left hand translating immense mental visions into physical reality. Ludwig van Beethoven, composing his revolutionary symphonies as deafness closed in, structured soundscapes of profound emotional architecture, his creative process perhaps benefiting from a brain that integrated raw emotion and structural logic in uncommon ways. The scientist Marie Curie, who meticulously isolated radium from tons of pitchblende, combined relentless analytical rigor with an intuitive leap of faith about the nature of matter, a blend of traits that may be facilitated by less rigid cerebral lateralization. The left-handed perspective often involves seeing the whole and the parts simultaneously, a valuable asset in fields requiring both grand vision and meticulous detail. Consider the architect Frank Lloyd Wright, whose organic structures seem to grow from their landscapes, a testament to holistic spatial reasoning, or the artist M.C. Escher, a left-hander who crafted impossible geometries and endless staircases, his mind effortlessly navigating paradoxical spaces. In these realms, the advantage is not one of confrontation, but of conception. The left-handed artist or thinker often approaches a blank canvas, a silent orchestra, or an unsolved equation from a subtly different angle, their cognitive wiring allowing them to bypass conventional patterns and forge new ones. Thus, the fighters and the artists are two sides of the same coin, minted from the unique neurobiology of the left-hander. In combat, the unexpected angle becomes a tactical weapon. In creation, it becomes a novel perspective. One leverages difference for direct competition, the other for original expression. Both paths celebrate the unique output of the left-handed mind, transforming a historical mark of suspicion into a modern signature of skill and insight. The left-hander's journey from the feared Scavarius of the Roman arena to the celebrated maestro in the concert hall is not a contradiction, but a revelation. It shows that the very trait that made them stand out as targets for stigma also equipped them to excel, to innovate, and to see the world in ways the majority could not. They are the wild cards in humanity's deck, dealt consistently across the ages, capable of both winning the hand and redesigning the game. Asterisk. Chapter 10. A world designed against them. Asterisk. The alarm clock rings, and the modern left-hander begins their day in a world meticulously crafted for someone else. It is a world of quiet, cumulative friction, where ordinary objects hold a latent bias, and simple tasks require silent negotiation. The struggle is no longer against witch hunts or doctrinal condemnation, but against the gentle, pervasive tyranny of ergonomics. From the moment they reach for a pair of scissors, the asymmetry declares itself. The molded plastic handles, contoured to fit the right thumb and fingers, force the left hand into an awkward, inefficient claw grip, pushing the blades apart rather than slicing cleanly together. This small daily frustration is a microcosm of a lifetime spent in a mirror image universe, where convenience is a right-handed privilege. The architecture of daily life is a monument to the majority. In the classroom or office, the left-hander encounters the writing desk, a wooden relic from an era of inkwells, now often a plastic tablet arm, always attached to the right side of the chair. To use it, they must twist their body into a corkscrew pose, their arm curled around the edge, their paper angled precariously. The spiral binding of a notebook becomes a ridge of metal teeth digging into the wrist, a constant physical reminder of being on the wrong side of the design. Power tools bear warning labels and safety guards positioned for a right-handed operator. Using a circular saw or a cordless drill requires conscious, cautious reorientation, turning every DIY project into a potential exercise in ambidextrous contortion. Even the humble can opener, the vegetable peeler, the measuring cup with its markings visible only from one side, all whisper the same message: you are an afterthought. Yet, within this landscape of minor adversity, a culture of adaptation flourishes. Left-handers become masters of subtle workarounds, developing a unique, often graceful, physical vocabulary. They learn to write with a hooked wrist, arching their hand above the line to avoid smearing ink or graphite, a posture graphologists sometimes call the inverted writer. They become adept at using computer mice with their right hand, their brains seamlessly switching dominance for digital tasks. They sit at the end of tables in restaurants to avoid elbow collisions, and they instinctively reach for mugs without handles to avoid the discomfort of a right-handed curve. These adaptations are not complaints but competencies, a quiet testament to human plasticity. The left-hander navigates the world like a skilled sailor tacking against a prevailing wind, using ingenuity to reach the same destination. The late 20th century witnessed a quiet revolution in response to this persistent friction, the rise of left-handed specialty products. What began as niche curiosities, left-handed scissors in school supply catalogues, a single awkward model of golf club blossomed into a global market. Today, one can find left-handed guitars with reversed stringing, left-handed chef's knives with the bevel on the opposite side, left-handed desks, fountain pens with specially ground nibs for leftward pull strokes, and even left-handed watches with crowns on the opposite side. These products are more than mere conveniences. They are validations. They signal that the left-handed experience is recognized, that their comfort is worth manufacturing for, that they are not required to perpetually adapt to a world that refuses to accommodate them. Online communities and forums have sprung up, creating virtual gathering places where left-handers share tips, frustrations, and a sense of camaraderie, transforming a solitary experience into a shared identity. Social attitudes have undergone a parallel shift, moving from active stigma to a bemused, often intrusive curiosity. The overt punishments of the Victorian schoolroom are gone, replaced by a constant, low-level commentary. The phrase "you're left-handed," uttered with a tone of mild astonishment, is a near-universal experience. It is a microaggression not of malice but of thoughtlessness, a reminder that one's natural state is still considered notable, a deviation from the unspoken default. Left-handers learn to smile through demonstrations of how neat or cool it looks when they write, to patiently explain for the 1000th time that no, they are not inherently more creative or clumsy, and to deflect the old, tired jokes about the right way to do things. The stigma has faded, but it has been replaced by a kind of perpetual spotlight, a condition of being perpetually interesting for the most mundane of reasons. This modern existence, therefore, is a tapestry woven from threads of frustration, adaptation, validation, and lingering otherness. The left-hander lives in the intersection of two worlds, the right-handed one they must physically navigate, and the emerging left-handed one that offers tools and community. They are no longer persecuted, but they are perpetually peripheral, their lived experience a silent critique of a world built on the assumption of a universal right-handed norm. Every awkward reach for a right-handed tool, every effortless use of a left-handed one, every patient answer to a curious question, is part of a continuous unspoken dialogue about difference and design. Their daily life is a quiet, ongoing experiment in human variation, proving that even in a world designed against them, they not only persist but innovate, adapt and carve out spaces both physical and social, where their left-handedness is not a problem to be solved, but simply a way of being. Asterisk. Asterisk. Chapter 11. The Survival Story. Asterisk. Asterisk. Why has the 10% persisted? Across the sweep of millennia, through ice ages and empires, witch hunts and schoolrooms, the left-handed minority has held its ground with the quiet tenacity of a deep-rooted tree. The answer to this ancient mystery is not a single thread but a braided cord, woven from 3 strands: evolutionary balance, genetic complexity, and cultural resilience. Together they form a story not of error, but of essential diversity, not of weakness, but of a quiet, strategic endurance that is a testament to the adaptability of the human species. The evolutionary strand is the strongest, the most elegant explanation for the stable equilibrium. The theory of balanced polymorphism reveals a beautiful dynamic logic. In a world of predominantly right-handed interactions, the left-hander's inherent difference carries both cost and benefit. The costs are the minor inefficiencies, the awkward tools, the social friction, the constant low-grade adaptation to a world built for the mirror image. But the benefit, though occasional, is potent. The advantage of surprise in direct competition. From the prehistoric skirmish to the modern sports arena, the left-handed fighter's reversed stance and unexpected angles have provided a disproportionate edge in confrontations, where victory translates into survival, status, and reproductive success. This creates a self-regulating equilibrium. If left-handers become too rare, their surprise factor grows more lethal, boosting their success and numbers. If they become too common, the advantage diminishes as right-handers adapt, and the costs reassert themselves. Thus, the 10% is not a random fraction but an evolutionary sweet spot, a testament to nature's wisdom in preserving a strategic wildcard. The left-hander is humanity's built-in disruptor, a necessary variation that keeps the whole species more agile, more prepared for the unexpected. The genetic strand reveals why this trait is so resiliently passed down, yet so delightfully unpredictable. Handedness is not governed by a simple on-off switch, but by a subtle polygenic orchestra, conducted in the fluid darkness of the womb. A constellation of genes of small effect sets a predisposition, a gentle nudge toward one side or a neutral openness to chance. This genetic whisper is then amplified or redirected by the chaotic ballet of prenatal development, fluctuations in hormones like testosterone, the random noise of cellular division, the tiny asymmetries of a growing brain. This explains why identical twins can differ in handedness, and why inheritance patterns defy simple Mendelian ratios. Left-handedness is not a destiny written in indelible code, but a probable outcome shaped by a conversation between inherited blueprint and developmental serendipity. This very complexity protects it. It cannot be easily bred out because it is not a single gene's fault. It is a emergent property of a dynamic system, a natural variation in the human developmental recipe that produces a differently organized brain and a dominant left hand. The cultural strand, perhaps the most poignant, speaks to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of misunderstanding. For centuries, the left hand was not seen as a biological variation, but as a moral or spiritual flaw. It was branded sinister, linked to the devil, used as evidence in witch trials, and beaten into submission in classrooms. Yet, the 10% endured. They adapted in silence, hooking their wrists to write, modifying tools, hiding their nature when necessary, and expressing it through skill when possible. Their survival through these periods of active persecution is a powerful narrative of cultural resilience. It proves that a trait, even when burdened with the heaviest symbolic weight, cannot be extinguished if it is rooted in the fundamental biology of a significant minority. The left-hander's journey from feared omens to celebrated artists and athletes is a story of human culture slowly, often painfully, coming to align with human biological reality. Their persistence forced accommodation, from the left-handed tools in Egyptian tombs to the specialty scissors in modern catalogues. They are a living reminder that diversity, even when inconvenient or misunderstood, is incredibly tough to erase. Left-handers, therefore, are a quiet testament to human diversity and adaptability. They are the embodied argument for the value of cognitive difference, the strategic benefit of unpredictability, and the stubborn beauty of developmental variation. their history is a mirror held up to our species, reflecting our capacities for both fear and fascination, for cruelty and curiosity, for designing worlds that exclude and then ingeniously adapting to live within them anyway. As this journey through time draws to a close, the trait settles into its proper place, not as a problem to be solved, but as a quiet, enduring mystery in the human story. It is a mystery with scientific explanations, yet those explanations only deepen the wonder. The stable 10% is a whisper from our evolutionary past, a signature of our genetic complexity, and a badge of cultural survival. In the stillness before sleep, one might contemplate the left hand, not your own, perhaps, but the concept of it, that millions, for all of recorded history, have reached, created, fought, and loved with a different dominant hand. Their existence is a gentle, persistent proof that there is more than one way to be human, that the blueprint for our species has always included an alternative design. This is not a flaw but a feature, not a shadow but a different angle of light. The survival of the left-hander is a lullaby of persistence, a soothing refrain that hums of balance, complexity, and the unassailable resilience of natural variation in the great, unfolding story of humankind. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 12, Echoes in the Data, asterisk, asterisk. The story of the left-hander is written not only in stone and scripture, but in the quiet, accumulating language of statistics. Across the globe, from the most isolated tribal societies to the densest mega-cities, demographic surveys echo the same persistent refrain, approximately 10%. This fraction appears with remarkable consistency, a stable minority in every culture and historical period for which we have reliable data. Ancient Roman census fragments, medieval guild rolls, Victorian school records, and modern national health studies all converge on this number. It transcends geography, religion, and technological sophistication. The Kung-san hunter-gatherers of the Kalahari and the stock traders of Tokyo exhibit the same baseline prevalence. This universal constancy is the most compelling clue that left-handedness is not a cultural artifact, but a deep biological fixture of the human condition, a trait as fundamental to our species as the variance in eye color or blood type, yet far more enigmatic in its unwavering proportion. Within this stable percentage, researchers have uncovered a trove of curious correlations, some illuminating, others mere statistical phantoms. A well-documented finding is that left-handers, on average, recover more quickly and completely from certain types of brain injuries, particularly strokes affecting the language centers. This resilience is thought to stem from their more bilateral or variably organized brains. If language function is less rigidly locked into one hemisphere, the undamaged side can more readily assume its duties. Another intriguing correlation links left-handedness to a slightly higher incidence of immune disorders like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, a connection possibly mediated by shared genetic pathways or prenatal hormonal environments. Yet, for every such correlation, a debunked myth must be laid to rest. Left-handers are not more accident-prone. Early studies suggesting this fail to account for a world filled with right-handed hazards. They do not die significantly younger. A famous, flawed study from the 1990s has been thoroughly discredited by larger, more rigorous research. They are not overwhelmingly more creative or intelligent, though their cognitive style may differ. The data, when stripped of sensationalism, paints a picture of a normal human variation with a few mild, biologically interesting tweaks at the edges of the bell curve. The role of the left-hander in technological innovation forms a subtle but profound subplot in human history. This influence begins at the very dawn of technology, with those Paleolithic toolmakers whose leftward-struck flakes created implements that fit a different grip, perhaps solving a manufacturing or butchering problem from a novel angle. This tradition of alternative problem-solving persisted. In the workshops of the Industrial Revolution, left-handed machinists and engineers, forced to adapt right-handed lathes and presses, sometimes devised more efficient setups or safety modifications that benefited all. The most resonant modern echo, however, may be in the realm of computing. The field's pioneers were populated by a disproportionate number of left-handers, from Alan Turing to Steve Jobs. The cognitive style associated with left-handedness, spatial reasoning, systems thinking, and the ability to mentally manipulate abstract structures may have been uniquely suited to conceptualizing the non-physical architectures of software and circuit design. In a domain that existed purely in logic and imagination before it could be built, a brain accustomed to seeing things from a different lateral perspective was a potent asset. This chapter serves as a gentle, fact-filled epilogue to the historical journey, a moment to survey the landscape from the high ground of accumulated evidence. The echoes in the data are reassuring. They confirm that the left-hander's experience, for all its historical turbulence, is rooted in a natural and stable human polymorphism. The correlations, both real and debunked, teach caution against easy stereotypes, reminding us that biology is a tapestry of probabilities, not destinies, and the thread of innovation highlights a beautiful reciprocity. Just as left-handers have had to adapt to a right-handed world, their unique perspectives have, in turn, adapted and advanced that world. From flint knives to microchips, the data does not diminish the mystery of the 10%. It frames it with the quiet dignity of empirical truth. It tells us that left-handedness is not an anomaly to be explained away, but a consistent, productive, and fascinating strand in the data of humanity, a persistent echo that confirms our species' rich and varied design. Asterisk, asterisk, Chapter 13, The Quiet Revolution, asterisk, asterisk. The final decades of the 20th century witnessed a transformation so profound it was almost silent, a revolution not of barricades and slogans, but of scissors, pens, and unbound hands. The long campaign of forced retraining, which had reached its brutal zenith in Victorian classrooms and lingered in schools well into the 1950s, finally began to recede. A new understanding, percolating up from neuroscience and trickling into popular consciousness, suggested that trying to rewire a child's innate handedness was not just cruel, but neurologically reckless. Teachers, armed with fresh pedagogical insights, gradually stopped tying left hands behind backs and rapping knuckles with rulers. The last vestiges of institutional coercion dissolved, replaced by a policy of benign neglect that felt to a generation of left-handed children like liberation. For the first time in centuries, they could pick up a pencil without first calculating the cost. This newfound freedom found a symbolic home in International Left-Handers' Day, established on August 13, 1992. What began as a whimsical celebration, a day for left-handers to complain good-naturedly about right-handed tools, evolved into a platform for gentle advocacy and visibility. It was a day to highlight the simple ergonomic injustices of everyday life, to showcase left-handed products and to share stories. The day carried no anger, only a warm collective acknowledgement of a shared experience. It marked a cultural tipping point, where left-handedness shifted from a subject of correction or curiosity to one of identity and community. No longer were left-handers isolated anomalies in their classrooms. They were part of a global 10%, a tribe with its own minor holidays and inside jokes about spiral notebooks and smudged ink. Beneath this social shift, the scientific quest to unravel the mystery continued to accelerate. Neuroscience, armed with fMRI and advanced genetic sequencing, moved beyond simple lateralization maps. Researchers now explored the left-handed brain as a model of neural plasticity and alternative organization, studying how its more symmetrical or variably wired architecture might influence everything from memory consolidation to risk assessment. Genetics abandoned the search for a single left-handed gene and embraced the complex polygenic reality, identifying dozens of genetic markers that collectively nudged the probability, their expression swayed by the prenatal environment in a delicate dance of chance and biology. Each discovery peeled back a layer of the enigma, replacing superstition with a deeper, more wondrous complexity. The left-hander was not a mistake but a masterpiece of developmental variability. In this new light, left-handedness began to be embraced as a powerful symbol of neurodiversity. It became a clear, visible example of how human brains can be wired differently, yet function brilliantly, a testament to the many valid ways of perceiving and interacting with the world. The left-handed mind, with its potential for enhanced interhemispheric communication and its resistance to rigid specialization, stood as a natural counterpoint to the myth of a one-size-fits-all cognitive ideal. In classrooms and workplaces, the accommodation of left-handedness, providing appropriate tools, allowing for different writing postures, became a small but meaningful practice in honoring neurological difference. It was a concrete step toward recognizing that building a world for the majority meant inadvertently excluding a resilient creative minority. The final soothing thought is this: left-handers are not errors, but essential threads in humanity's fabric. Their 10% is not a glitch in the system. It is a critical part of the system's design, maintained by evolutionary balance, genetic richness, and an unyielding capacity for adaptation. Their history, from the cave artist to the sidelined schoolchild to the celebrated artist, is a lullaby of persistence, a gentle rhythmic story of enduring against tides of fear, misunderstanding, and inconvenient design. They are the living proof that uniformity is not nature's way. Diversity is. The world, for all its right-handed scissors and awkwardly placed desk arms, is a richer, more surprising, and more innovative place, because the left hand has always been there, reaching from the other side, offering a different angle, a unique grip, a silent, steadfast testament to the beautiful variance woven into the very heart of being human. Their quiet revolution is complete, not in conquest but in acceptance. Their story, a comforting whisper that in the great sprawling tapestry of our species, every thread, no matter its twist, belongs,